I'm here today to announce that the program known as DACA that was effectuated under the Obama administration is being rescinded.
It's my judgment that I was fired because of the Russia investigation. The endeavor was to change the way the Russia investigation was being conducted.
I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides.
It was a summer of news and chaos around the White House and inside it.
I think he's going to be just fine, okay?
I'm very happy. I have to thank the President of the United States.
These guys are awesome.
Tensions grew within the U.S.
We stand here today on a shameful day for America.
And beyond its borders.
I don't think we can make a deal. So I think we'll end up probably terminating NAFTA.
But as summer nears its end, what are the lasting implications for President Donald Trump? And what new developments lay ahead? It's been quite a few months. Boy, oh boy, it's so nice to talk to you, David. Want to start with the news of the day. 60 Minutes, there was an interview with Steve Bannon, the former senior strategist for the president, saying, quote, that firing Comey was the biggest mistake in modern political history, the head of the FBI. Was that the biggest mistake in modern political history?
Well, it depends on how guilty you are. So firing Comey did launch the Mueller investigation, but it also bought President Trump time, because if he hadn't fired Comey, the FBI would have been hot on his heels for whatever it is that he is so eager to hide. There may be crimes in the vicinity of Donald Trump and the Trump campaign. If his former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, if he did not properly declare himself as a foreign agent when he was receiving foreign money, that's a crime. If his former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, did not properly disclose foreign receipts, or if he didn't pay the proper taxes, those are crimes. But shockingly, it is not in itself a crime for an American presidential campaign to work with a hostile foreign power. It's a scandal, it's an outrage, it's an attack on national security and democracy, but it's not a crime. And if that's the biggest question we have, but it may get bogged down in a lot of technical discussion on cable TV of, was this law broken or was that law broken?
You wrote months ago that you thought that he would make it to the end of his term. You still think so?
Barring a health event, he probably makes it to the end of his term. The Republicans control both houses of Congress. Both houses of Congress have to act to impeach and remove a president. The House impeaches, the Senate removes. You'd have to imagine, first, that the Democrats win both houses of Congress in 2018. Second, that there's conclusive evidence of really serious wrongdoing by him personally. And third, that even with those two things happening, Democrats don't say, we'd rather run against him in 2020 than bring him down in 2019.
Do you think that the Republicans are still with him?
Well, the Republican Party, as if you mean office holders, members of the Senate, they've always been terrified of him and upset of him, but they go along with him out of fear, not out of belief. So people like Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, they live in fear of him and fear of their voters.
You have a new book that says he is responsible for the corruption of American democracy. So if he's there, as you predict, for many more years, how much damage has been done? How much damage could be done?
Well, thank you for the mention of the book. It's out in January. I'm not above making a commercial. It's called Trumpocracy, and it is about this question: how, in a system of so many checks and so many balances, all intended to screen out a character like Donald Trump, how did he get past that screen, and how does he continue to do damage? And he's doing enormous damage every day, because it turns out a lot of the things that make democracy go in any country aren't written down. There's no law that says the president has to release the president's tax returns. Presidents just do it. There's no law that says the president's family can't shamelessly cash in on the president. There are limits on what the president can do, but not on what his children can do. People just didn't do it. But once somebody starts, and it's very hard to write laws ever to prevent it, people do it. But one of the most dangerous things that's happening, one of the very most dangerous, is the rest of the government is reacting against Donald Trump, like scar tissue building up, or like an autoimmune disorder. And people are doing things throughout the government to try to protect the government against Donald Trump that are also harmful. I mean, I imagine many people are sympathetic to the military refusing to obey the president's order on transgender troops for so long, basically saying, no, we don't think so. Thank you for your helpful comments, but no. But he's the commander-in-chief. They're supposed to do what he says. And yet they're getting into ever more the habit of not only disobeying him, but actually telling foreign governments on the record, when the president says this about North Korea, that's not binding, that's just one man's opinion.
But the base still seems to like him.
Your base always likes you. You don't lose elections with 0% of the vote. There's always somebody. The task for responsible opposition to President Trump is to build a coalition of enough people that the United States can have a different kind of government.
So what will that take?
I think that'll take, I think what it will probably take is some Democratic gains in the election of 2018, sufficient to jolt the leadership of the Republican Party into understanding they made a bad bet in 2016. They thought they could control him, and they have discovered that he is controlling them. As incompetent and amateurish as he is, that he has had more impact on the Republican Party than it has had upon him.
There's a big debate in American media right now about whether to come right out and say that he's not well, that he's unstable, but there's this tradition of even psychiatrists saying, no, we're not going there. How would we know?
Well, in the election of 1964, a prominent psychiatrist wrote an article alleging that Barry Goldwater, the Republican nominee, was mentally unwell, and that was not true. And since then, it has been a strong ethical belief among psychiatrists that you should not diagnose anybody who's not actually literally your patient. And so there's a great
But this debate is happening now.
This debate is happening because of cable TV and Twitter. Look, we all carry in our pockets a little box that every day brings us the secret thoughts of the President of the United States. And when you look at that and think, that seems pretty crazy.
Tonight, Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen looks at how some are now questioning the President's mental stability.
I really question his ability to, his fitness to be in this office.
This is a man who is not well.
Is it true that Republican colleagues of yours expressed concern about President Trump's mental health?
A few.
I think that's a ridiculous and outrageous claim.
I'm not a psychiatrist, so I don't have to be bound by this rule. He pretty obviously presents the symptoms of capital N, capital P, capital D, narcissistic personality disorder. Not the self-involvement we mean when we use the term casually, but literally someone who has that gaping hole in the soul that is covered by building this giant edifice of ego and then viciously attacking and attempting to destroy anyone who touches that edifice, because the person with this disorder is so afraid that their critics are right.
Quite the revolving door. A lot of people have left the White House.
Yes.
And now John Kelly, a military man, has been brought in to control Donald Trump. Is Donald Trump controllable?
Donald Trump is not controllable.
So who is in control?
Well, it's a contention, but look, all governments have a lot of competing egos and competing imperatives, and that can be very creative. I mean, it's messy, but it's creative. In this case, the mechanisms that make it work are largely absent. So the president is more and more trapped inside a lot of structures he didn't build and that he doesn't like. And so he will be a good boy for 24, 36, or 72 hours, and then he'll lash out and say something or do something crazy. Like that terrible remark, Fire and Fury, about North Korea. That was not in his notes.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
He seemed to be threatening to strike first. American policy has been, North Korea, you understand, if you act out, it's the end for you, but you go first. We will not attack you. President Trump seemed to threaten that he would attack first, and that is a very dangerous thing to do when you're dealing with nuclear weapons. It's always a dangerous thing to do, but especially with nuclear weapons.
The other Steve Bannon quote was that he's predicting that there will be a nationalist, populist movement, but he doesn't know whether it'll be from the left or from the right. Is he right?
Well, we're seeing that across the developed world. The combination of slow economic growth, which means there's less to go around, the aging of the baby boomers, which means the biggest generation in history to date is arriving at the age when they need the support of government, and rising levels of ethnic diversity within societies, which has the effect of reducing social trust between groups, means that there are opportunities for nationalist actors, and they are seizing them. Canada has been exempt, and you can understand a lot of why it's happening elsewhere. Canada's the dog that didn't bark, and you can learn a lot about the dogs that do from the dog that didn't.
Aha, we have to take a short break, but David Frum has more on Donald Trump and an urgent warning for Justin Trudeau.
I have a love for these people, and hopefully now Congress will be able to help them and do it properly.
Donald Trump says he loves the Dreamers, but on Tuesday he may end the program known as DACA, which allows nearly 1 million young people to live and work in this country without fear of deportation.
Big split in the United States right now about Trump's position on DACA, which is about undocumented children. What impact do you see? How does that play out for Canadians? Does that mean more people coming here? Is that going to split the Republican Party there?
Well, Canada, one of the impacts it has had on Canada is the Canadian government spoke very loosely about welcoming refugees. It wrote a check it never intended for anybody to cash, and people are cashing it because not only are refugees coming from around the world, but a lot of people in the United States who don't have proper status in the United States, who now find themselves under pressure, thinking, well, Canada's an easier bet, and they're crossing. And I've been warning about this for a long time, that there are going to be thousands of people coming into Canada. Canada needs a much clearer message to the world that Canadian laws will be enforced, because it leads to crisis.
So you think some of those undocumented kids affected by this announcement by Trump?
I don't know literally the DACA population, but there have been people who are in the United States completely illegally, especially some of the, like in Minnesota, some of the Somali illegal immigrants in Minnesota who have made their way to Canada. One of the things that should be a warning to Canada from the Donald Trump experience is if there are things that people expect their government to do, including making sure that immigration is carried out in a legal and orderly way. And if liberal-minded people won't do it, it isn't that the public will accept that it not be done. They will then turn to extremists to do the job that liberal-minded people won't do. So these jobs should be done by people with more normal political views.
So what's your advice for Justin Trudeau on the immigration front?
Enforce your borders. Enforce your borders. If you don't, because you're not doing anybody any favors. What you're doing is inviting the kind of extremism we've seen in Europe that has touched the United States. Canada takes more immigrants relative to its population than the United States does. But because it has always been an orderly process from many different places, so there's no one group and no third language grows up in immigrant communities, Canadians have been very accepting of it. This was a tremendous success. It didn't just happen by accident. Success is always worked for. And immigration is a stress on any society. It has potential to yield magnificently positive results if managed well. But if you lose control of it, it can ignite populist movements that threaten not only the migration issue, but threaten the stability of your whole democracy.
Justin Trudeau has been called the Trump whisperer because he seems to have a friendly relationship. What do you think of his, I don't want to say handling, but his handling of Donald Trump?
Well, Canada doesn't have a lot of good options. Germany, which is stronger, richer, and farther away, can be more defiant of the United States. Canada has to be careful. And Canada also has the most important job for any leader in Canada, is to remember Canada has an enormous number of friends in the United States. In fact, Canada has more friends in the United States than Donald Trump has friends in the United States. So in managing an issue like NAFTA, remember, the governors are on Canada's side. And the governors have tremendous influence over their congressional delegation. And so the smart play is to understand, look, there are things in NAFTA that need to be up to date. It was written before there was an internet, as people often point out. But it has to be worked on in good faith. And there are a lot of people who will work with Canada on that. Donald Trump won't. So the task for Canadian political leadership is to build networks of friendship within the United States. And that means often a very soft line. I know it's often unsatisfying for Canadians who would like to see their country's leader speak out in the way, say, the German chancellor or the leader of the German opposition party has done, but it's not an option for Canada.
David, thank you.
Thank you so much.